My thoughts on all the different editions of D&D today on Dungeon Craft. Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor Dungeonmaster, and this channel is about playing the ultimate game of D&D. Level up your game by subscribing and click the bell icon so you'll be informed when we upload new videos every Thursday. So one of our Facebook members, Graham Kane, writes, PDM, would you make a video where you go through the various editions of D&D and explain what you like and dislike about each? Sure, Graham, I think that's a great idea. It's a great way to bring in 2020. Happy 2020, by the way. I haven't wished you that because this is the first video we're taping in 2020. We taped several weeks in advance. So yeah, each edition of D&D has brought something new to the table, some sort of original idea, and at least made me pause and reflect about what I like about the game. So I'm going to skip the original white box edition as well as the J. Eric Holmes version because I never played those versions of D&D. My first exposure to the game was the 1980 Tom Moldvay edition with the Errol Otis cover, and I just love that creepy cover and the colors he uses. It looks like a wood etching. There was this aura and mystique about D&D at the time. Most people who come to D&D are introduced by older people playing it, and it's demonstrated to them. I never came to the game that way. I had met people who had played the game, but I had never even witnessed the game. And the people who played it were like 9 years old, and they had older brothers and stuff who played, and they couldn't explain it to me. Like, I was like, so, where is the board? And they would say, well, there's a bunch of different levels that you go on. And I was like, well, what's the maximum level? How deep can you go in this dungeon? And they were like, there's like 100 levels, because a little kid, that's the ultimate number for them. So I had no concept, never seen a miniature war game played. So when I'm reading these rules, I'm reading them from a perspective of someone who knew absolutely nothing. Like, I'm just like a total blank slate. And I had difficulty understanding them. My friend Joey had got them for Christmas in 1980. And I remember I went over his house the day after Christmas in 1980, December 26th, and we got together to make up some characters. And I think we did it wrong because we used a 20-sided die to generate ability scores. And he just gave me the book because he didn't feel like reading it, even though it was only 64 pages long or something like that. And that's where the art really came in. The Errol Otis art was so evocative. What I thought was Dungeons & Dragons was dark, mysterious, treacherous, dangerous, and that's exactly what I got in that version of the game. As I look back on it, I love the succinct writing style, like where they describe every class in just one paragraph. And there's only something like 6 classes, like Elf is just a magic user and fighter combined. And what I'm struck with, and I still like about the game, is the low hit point numbers. A rogue, well, a thief, its predecessor, only had D4 hit points per level. And you didn't get maximum hit points on the first level. So that means you had an average of 2.5 hit points per level. So a 4th level thief would have 10 hit points. A 4th level fighter, because a fighter had D8 hit points per level, 4th level fighter would have only 20 hit points. So when I suggest changes to the games, like we should have lower hit points and cap hit points at 20, that's where it comes from. Because I remember the game, it was very fast. Like a dragon only had 36 hit points. Much faster play. Today's D&D is more like the characters like superheroes. Whereas in the first edition, you were struggling to survive. And just like, if you were a thief, and you missed one saving throw with a poison lock and a needle in the lock, you were dead. So that game really has a sense of perilousness and danger that I still like today. What I dislike is the confusing format. It doesn't begin, as it should, with an example of play. Instead, there is an example of play, but it's found in the middle of the book, and it's also found at the end of the book. And what's weird is, the middle of the book is the end of the example of play. The end of the book is the beginning of the example of play. So you had to kind of flip back and join them instead of it just beginning at the beginning. And also they took certain things for granted, like I wasn't even clear that the map should be hidden from the players. They never said that explicitly. No one ever told me that. I had to figure that out for myself. Now, if you are interested in this version of the game, you can find it on Amazon, I'm sure, or eBay. But I've seen people asking like $100 for it in some cases. But probably your best way to go is just go to a retro clone reprint. My recommendation is Old School Essentials. William at Necrotic Gnome sent me this box set. The rules are split up over several books that cover things like the core rules and monsters and treasures and so forth. And they use the books very efficiently in the way I like. They print all the important information on the inside covers so you don't have to do a lot of flipping through the books. And much more clear. They've cleaned up some stuff in the text and rewritten it in a way that a modern reader could really understand it on the first go-through. I may do a full review of Old School Essentials at a later time, but it is a great way to get into the game if you just want to go back and get that 1980 feeling. The next iteration of the game was the classic Red Box Frank Mentzer edition with the iconic Larry Elmore dragon cover. This version is notable because Mentzer was able to crack the code that Moldvay and John Eric Holmes couldn't quite do. He started out with a tutorial. You had like a pick-a-path adventure, only you rolled dice, and it demonstrated how to hit an orc and how to take damage and subtract it from your hit points and so on and so forth. And it also included a story. There was a wizard named Bargle, and you had to hunt him down, and you met this beautiful cleric named Alina. And it was very surprising because Alina gets snuffed by Bargle. And yeah, that was just shocking at the time. She doesn't come back to life or anything. She's just dead. It traumatized, I think, a whole generation of people because they've invented a game called Kill Bargle, and they have convention games where you try to get revenge on Bargle for Alina's death. So apparently that scene really resonated with people. But Mentzer deserves a lot of credit for being the guy that could crack the code and teach people who never played the game how to play it. Now, other than that, the rules are identical pretty much to the Moldvay Edition. It's just a much improved format. But things that I don't like about it that they should have fixed are things like descending armor class. Armor class, like if you wear chainmail and a shield, you're armor class 4, and you have to look up this conversion chart, and you're like, oh, I need a 16 to hit an armor class 4. Also, spell levels don't align to character levels, so your 3rd level wizard cannot cast 3rd level magic user spells, and this is extremely confusing, and it is still confusing today. This is something like Thaco. I don't know why they haven't replaced it yet. And finally, magic users are weak, like really super weak, where they can only cast 1 spell on 1st level per day. So it was like, I cast sleep spell, I'm done. And that's because Gary Gygax just hated magic users. He couldn't understand why anyone wanted to play them. So yeah, he deliberately nerfed magic users. And I think that the new versions of the game have probably gone in the other direction, but you definitely want to have a character that could do more than just one thing on 1st level. Now, the 1st edition of the game, first of all, we got to take a look at the Dave Trampier cover, which is fantastic. I mean, it's like dark, and these adventurers look exhausted. They're cleaning the blood off their swords. It really encapsulates the feeling of the game. You went in there, you got beat up, and you just barely dragged these treasure chests out into the light. I've never liked any Player's Handbook cover as much as I like the Dave Trampier version. Now, when you look at the rules, the key with the rules for 1st edition is the balance. Gygax, he split the elves, and you could be like an elf fighter or a magic user. Elves got infravision, they got the immunity to certain charm spells, they could speak a bunch of languages, and they got a bonus to dexterity. But there was a trade-off, which is, in certain classes like fighter, I think you could only go up to 6th level. A halfling could only go up to 4th level as a fighter. Only humans had the ability to go up to unlimited levels. That idea of balance permeates everything, even the level advancement system, where different classes need different amounts of experience points to advance in level. So, for example, rangers and paladins have a lot more powers than the average fighter, but they need way more experience points to advance as well, so you have that balance as well. Thieves needed half the experience points to advance that magic users did, which kind of made sense because they had the life expectancy of mayflies, right, or spinal tap drummers. They were always dying, missing saving throws, so this allowed your thief to progress twice as fast and catch up to those characters who are on 7th or 8th level. Now today we have a uniform advancement system, but it has a lot of unintended consequences, which is that why would you ever play a fighter if you could be a ranger and paladin and get superpowers with no penalties? Now there were other things that that were kind of wonky and weird, like thieves had a system where they had to roll percentage dice instead of d20s, and they had to roll low. They had to get under a number to pick a lock or climb a wall. and that was weird. I never quite understood how grappling worked, and people have asked what I think of psionics. I've never understood it to this day. It just wasn't written clearly enough that I could understand it. But the sheer scope of first edition, and considering it's the work of just one singular author, it really has a consistent, coherent vision. And the Dungeon Master's Guide was a complete revelation. Magic Items takes up a huge section of the book, but the really cool thing are the charts in the back of the book. Gary Gygax was a chartaholic. He had a chart for everything. Wandering monsters at every level, types of rooms, types of furniture in those rooms, lists of herbs, lists of adjectives to describe magical substances, like it's sticky or it's viscous or it's oily. This love of charts really, I think, permeates the old school community. Anyone who got into the game at that time just loves charts, like OSR products like the Black Hacker, 5 Torches Deep, or Vornheim, the Complete City Kit, are essentially just books of charts. And I think the new Dungeon Master's Guides could use more of that. And who could forget the afterword? And the afterword, which is in this, got this demon, a demon who would disappear in the second edition, but the afterwards, Gygax writes, never hold to the letter written, nor allow some barracks room lawyer to force quotations from the rule book upon you. You are the creator and final arbiter by ordering things as they should be. The game as a whole first, your campaign next, and your participants thereafter. If you do that, you will be playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons the way it was meant to be. There is a definite tendency towards having a DM-centric game here. All the authority rested with them. And if your Dungeon Master said, we don't have clerics in my world, or I don't have elves, or I think wish is too powerful to spell, it doesn't exist in my world, people just accepted it. This is what I mean when I say you have to put the master back in Dungeon Master. Before we move to second edition, if you could just do me a favor, and if you enjoy this content, like, comment, and share this video. Independent creators, their videos are not being promoted as much and not being recommended to as many people. So if you do like the content, and if you comment and like the video, that goes a long way toward getting it to other people and growing the channel. Thanks a lot. Second edition is a really interesting edition for me because I got published with a bunch of second edition products, yet I never owned a copy of the second edition rules. This is a version which had removed any sort of demons, any sort of semi-nude dryads or succubi. The assassin character class was removed. It was an attempt to make a more family-friendly game that you could sell in a bookstore without complaints. And it was just kind of milquetoast to me. Like, at that point as a player, I started moving on to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which they were like, demons, man, we have legions of them. Just look at this cover to Shadows over Bogenhofen, one of the best adventures I think ever written. You got a full-fledged demon right on the cover. The other reason I didn't buy the second edition is because I played a game with Tracy Hickman. I played his Killer Breakfast, and I got in second place. I lasted for over 20 minutes. My character lived. But I asked him, are we going to play with second edition? And he said, we don't need no stinking second edition. And he confided in me that even the designers at TSR, they didn't really pay attention to editions. They're just kind of making it up as they go along, and stuff really isn't play tested. So when I get comments today where I suggest like changing initiative and people are like, well, that was carefully play tested, this is why I'm skeptical. Now, the third edition was legitimately groundbreaking. I remember getting it, bringing it home from the bookstore, opening up on my table. I was sitting in a hardback chair reading it. I read about 50 pages, and I called my friend Gene, who I'd played with for like 20 years, and I was like, Gene, this is the greatest role-playing game of all time, and I don't know how anything is ever going to replace it. It was so seamless and cohesive. Monty Cook, I believe, deserves the credit, from what I understand, of eliminating THAC0 and just asking the question, why does an armor class 4, you need to look at a chart and say 16? Why not just make it armor class 16? And why not just give everything a target number, and you roll a 20-sided die, use your ability scores to adjust it, and if you hit that target number, you succeed. That core rule changed the game forever. It made it seamless and cohesive. Gone were those complex percentile charts for thieves, and everything was running off the same engine, with the exception of magic. You still didn't roll a 20-sided die for that. But everything about the game was terrific. I love the artwork. It was like cohesive. It was like this sketch-like artwork. It looked like Leonardo da Vinci drawings, and it really had more of a cohesive flavor. 3.0 was such a well-designed system that I didn't notice it had any flaws till quite some time later after we had gotten characters up at 6th, 7th level. And that's where the familiar problems of D&D started settling in, namely power creep or the scalability problem. The idea that as the player characters get more powerful and get more hit points, it becomes more challenging to design challenging encounters for them. It simply becomes a headache. Now, a good Dungeon Master can do it, but I'm a lazy Dungeon Master. I think if an encounter takes me more than 5 minutes to plan, it's just too much time for me. I solved that problem by keeping the experience points for the characters really low and retiring them after 6th level. Then the 4th edition came out, and I did buy the player's handbook, and I opened it up, and I thought, what the heck is this? If you do like it, by the way, I'm not just going to crap all over 4th edition, because it does have minions, which are great. That's a great concept, that those lower level monsters just have 1 hit points, and you can wade through a whole army of orcs or goblins and, shoot a goblin with a single arrow and kill it. That is a great idea. I think essentially what the 4th edition did wrong is it changed too much. The introduction of powers, for example, seemed out of place to me, because here you have this totally new concept with this totally new jargon that hadn't appeared in previous iterations of the game. And the whole idea of the at-will powers, it's very World of Warcraft influenced, and it seemed like for the first time that D&D was chasing a trend instead of blazing a trail. So I have a video on what rules I don't play with 5th edition, and that may give some people the idea that I hate everything about 5th edition, but that's not true. There's some things that I really like about 5th edition, and let's start with advantage and disadvantage. This is a great rule because, let's face it, more dice equals more fun. When you get advantage and the target number is 14, I could just as easily say, all right, you have advantage, so the target number is 7. But when you roll 2 dice and pick the higher number, it just feels more fun. Old players, new players, I've never met anyone that doesn't think that is cool. Inspiration is cool. That is a cool concept. And disengage. You don't get an attack of opportunity if you break off combat. And that makes perfect sense because there's a great Lindy Beige video on this. If you're fighting someone with a sword, your arm is like 2 feet long and the sword is like 3 feet long. You're facing off, you're just out of sword length of each other. And then you move in, exchange blows, and someone might press the attack or you'll break up again. It's a simple matter in a sword fight is like you feint, right? Your opponent takes a step back, you take off, and you already got at least a 6 foot to 10 foot head start on them. Like if you are in the middle of a fight, you're not just going to expose your back bare to your opponent so they could stab you. You're going to wait for an opening where they're distracted, something gets in their way, or they get a little off balance, or they've just been hit, and use that as an opportunity to get away. I love disengage because it allows the players to disengage, because I don't want them to die. Whatever you, the viewers, think, and players, my players are watching this, I don't want you to die. This gives them a better chance to get away, and it also gives me, as a DM, the opportunity for my villains to get away, which I love because I like recurring villains. So that is another rule change, disengage, which is more realistic, and I think that that's just a great rule. Now there are a few things about 5e that I have quibbles with. I've mentioned them in other videos, and I'll be following up this video with some 6 changes I'd like to see in the 6th edition. But in the meantime, what are your experiences with the various editions of D&D? Where do you come into the hobby? What rules do you like or dislike? Put them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this content, please like it and share it. We have a great Facebook group if you want to join that. This has been Professor Dungeon Master for Dungeon Craft. I'll see you next time, and until then, may all your rolls be 20s.